All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sydney Diedrich, and I'm the marketing manager here at New Cloud Networks. I want to thank everyone for attending the Ransomware Preparedness and Recovery webinar today, brought to you by New Cloud Networks and Veeam. We're going to hear from myself as well as Brandon McCoy, a Veeam Solutions Engineer. And if at any time during the webinar you have any questions, please feel free to use the question feature on your screen. And all questions will be addressed at the end. I really want to take a moment to acknowledge the fact that ransomware is a very growing threat with the technology industry, and really every industry is seeing ransomware attacks coming through the pipeline. We're seeing growing attacks frequently every day, and it's getting worse and worse in terms of the prevalence of ransomware attacks. And I'll kind of hit a little bit, touch on that in a few slides coming through. And without further ado, I will go ahead and dive right in. So to kick things off, I wanted to hit home, as I mentioned, a few of the realities of what companies are facing when it comes to ransomware. And the truth is that, we as humans tend to belittle the likelihood of an event occurring. We hear about ransomware attacks on the news, and we tend to think that'll never happen to me. My systems are protected. I'm secure. I've got everything in place that I need to be in place. Or what are the odds of that actually happening to me? But the reality is that ransomware attacks are expected to occur every 14 seconds by the end of this year. So think about those odds. A new company is hit every 14 seconds. It starts to seem a lot more likely that a company like yours could face an attack. And another reality of ransomware is that while no one industry is excluded, verticals like healthcare and financial services are especially at risk due to the sensitive data that they handle. And hackers know that for companies like this, downtime means loss of life, loss of funds, and they're likely to get payment quicker because it means life and death. In fact, attacks on healthcare companies are expected to quadruple over the next year, which is a very staggering statistic. This all boils down to the most crucial realization of all. This is not stopping anytime soon. So since 2016, variations of ransomware have grown by more than 700%. This means that just when we think we've covered one vulnerability, another one pops up, and cybercriminals are working fast. They're constantly developing new ways to attack our businesses, and essentially, you can no longer afford to be unprepared. As we like to say, it's not a question of if you'll be hit with an attack, it's a question of when. So what happens when we face an attack? What's the cost? There's always the monetary cost associated with attacks. Lost revenue due to downtime, customer attrition, retribution to affected parties. But there's also the non-monetary costs that we may not think about, like damaged reputation. And essentially, IDG tells us that this will all boil down to $6 trillion annually in damages by 2021. Really, what we want to get across here is we don't want your company to become a part of this statistic. We want to help you to prepare in order to minimize these costs and damages as much as possible. And so without further ado, I do want to pass this over to Brandon McCoy over at Veeam. Brandon, are you on the line with us?
I sure am. Thanks, Sydney. How's it going, everyone? Thanks for passing the ball my way. So let's talk about ransomware. We'll start with talking about what it is. I'm sure most of you by now in the industry have heard of what ransomware is, but we'll just take a little deeper look. We'll talk about the ways that we commonly get hit, some proactive as well as reactive tips for ransomware, and then we'll pass it back to New Cloud. So what is ransomware? So ransomware is a malicious software that will restrict access to computers and sometimes backups as well, which is good reasons why we want to have multiple copies, and we'll get into that. The virus is spread cryptovirologically. I believe that's how you pronounce that word. And it encrypts and holds sensitive data. Obviously, the hackers here assume that this data is worth some amount of money, and so they're going to try to ask for that money based on maybe the size of your business or the sensitivity of that data in order to get that data back. So, do I have control of the slides? I don't. There we go. Okay, so taking a look at who's at risk, everyone. If you have data, if you work in pretty much any sector, any kind of information that could be important, maybe even personal data like on your laptop, those things can be hit with ransomware and you can be asked to pay some sort of Bitcoin. So whether it's education, financial sectors, the government, local and state municipalities, healthcare and retail, all the way down to the small mom and pop shops, everyone is at risk. And again, a lot of times we see these Bitcoins values based upon the size of the company. Obviously someone like an Uber or a Home Depot, may have to pay millions of dollars to get their data back, whereas, some smaller, boutique shop would only have to pay maybe $500. And there we go. Okay. So let's take a look at some common infection approaches. The most common is the Trojan. This was, I believe, the first ransomware strain that was ever released. And so this is just, your typical email attachment, some sort of link that you click on in an email, and next thing you know, you've downloaded some executable that begins to spread through your computers. Removable medias is another way, and you can see this interesting study that was done here where Google and 2 universities dropped a USB stick. Nothing on it. It was harmless, but it was being tracked. And just to find out who would pick up this USB and plug it in to see what was in it. So curiosity definitely does kill the cat. Malvertising is another one. So maybe you're browsing, online, searching Google, and you get a little pop-up. Maybe it looks like it's an Adobe update or some kind of link to you've won a free cruise to the Bahamas. Probably not best to click on those. And if you do see any kind of thing that looks like a legitimate program asking for an update, it's probably best to just go to that website and check yourself instead of hitting some link that just randomly pops up. We also see social media and SMS. So we've seen these before. I've seen these personally where it looks like you're getting a LinkedIn invitation or some sort of Facebook, Twitter request that's from somebody. It appears to be somebody but in reality it's a cloned account, or somehow they've gotten your email and are trying to act as someone else. So, and then as 2019 and even a few years before, we now see ransomware as a service. So back in the day, ransomware was, some kids in the basement, making some funny message, scroll through your screen and maybe lock your computer up. Today, we see third-party companies that actually sell ransomware as a service. They have call centers, customer service centers, and you don't even really have to be too savvy behind the keyboards in order to be a cyber criminal. So. All systems go. So, while Windows is the most commonly targeted type of operating system, there are ransomware strains for Linux and, yes, even Mac OS, believe it or not. So it's always important that you don't think, well, I have a Linux repository, so I'm never going to get, hit, or, I'm using Mac, so I'm never going to get hit. Anyone, any operating system, anything can be, at risk. So now that I scared you a little bit, let's talk about some proactive tips for ransomware preparedness. We'll start with how to prepare. So there's 5 things I want to touch on. One is keeping all software up to date. I'm sure many of you, as myself, have been guilty of seeing a pop-up that says a new update is available, and instead of clicking update, you click remind me later, remind me later, remind me later, and eventually it's too late. One of those vulnerabilities have come through before the patch was updated, so make sure you do that. Performing a threat analysis with your security team. I know we at Veeam, as well as NewCloud, do all kinds of things like that, right? We make sure that all of our people know what we're doing. We may even, have people try to find these vulnerabilities. I know Netflix has some things like that as well. Well, they'll do, I believe it's called like a monkey in the middle or monkey wrench program, where they drop this, actual ransomware into their software that bogs down everything. And then they see how long it takes to restore services and kind of, just planning it out to see how you would react in real life. So number 3 is training your staff on security practices. Again, we here at Veeam We get all kinds of phishing emails that are not real phishing emails, but if you click on it, you'll be redirected to some sort of training. A lot of, your everyday employees may not be as technical savvy. Maybe you could see these things coming from a mile away while other people aren't really familiar. So just making sure that they have that same kind of knowledge as you. Number 4 and 5 are my favorite. Number 4 is backing up all your information every day, at least once a day, right? And then number 5, backing up all information to a secure offsite location, which would be NewCloud's data centers. That is, again, when I talked earlier about even backups can sometimes be hit by ransomware, deleting local backups. Having that offsite copy at NewCloud is a great way to have some extra protection. So to know you're protected, we have a couple things that we can do here, and I believe there's an animation here. If we can just go through it. So VM1 reports are going to be able to show you where your backups are, what kind of snapshots you have. They're also going to be able to tell you if you have specific SLAs. Do you have multiple copies of your backups? Do you have enough restore points to satisfy auditing compliance? Do you have backups on tape? Where are those backups? How many restore points? So VM1 has a lot of different report assessments to help you being proactive and making sure that if something does happen, you're ready for that. So if you've been in the industry a while, you've probably heard the term 321. Veeam didn't create this, but we're huge proponents of it. 321, sometimes 32110, but basically it's having 3 different copies of your data. The first one being your production, the second one being a local copy on a disk, and the third one being an offsite copy at NewCloud Networks data centers. Will lead to 0 errors. So if you follow that 321 rule, you shouldn't have any issues there. And the way that we address this 321 rule is in the next slide here. And it's something called a backup copy job. Once again, a bunch of animations here, so maybe we just kind of click through them as I talk. Having your backup files from the first repository that we see here sent to NewCloud Networks. The first one would be obviously the full. This is going to go across the internet through Cloud Connect, which is a service that is on the Cloud Connect, the NewCloud side, as well as the customer's production environment. Once we have that first full backup, we want to transfer the incremental changes. You can even, seed that first full. There's some WAN acceleration options in case you don't have the best bandwidth. Between Veeam and NewCloud, we're going to be able to get those backups across the internet securely. Once we've got those fulls, we can also do GFS. So your weekly, monthly, yearly, quarterly roll-ups can also go to the offsite. And that's usually the way I prefer it, is having your local backups more frequently, and then your offsite longer term in case something really bad happens and you need to roll back a couple months. Now, I alluded to Cloud Connect, so this is the diagram for Cloud Connect. You've got your local repository, you're at the customer site, the Veeam backup and replication server down there in the middle. NewCloud Networks on the other side over here, they've got their customers backed up into these different quadrants, so a backup repository for each one of them. This little gateway here is the TLS connection, that's transport layer security, and that's like kind of an updated version of SSL. So there's no VPN needed. It's encrypted network across, and so your backups are securely sent to NewCloud's data centers, and you can recover from either your local or your offsite backups. Okay, now in this little slide right here where it's blinking red, it's just showing that, yes, you can send your backups directly to NewCloud from production, but that's not following the 321 rule. So it's best practice to have that local backup and then an offsite copy. Okay. Alrighty, and now we also have Cloud Connect replication. Now, when some people hear replication, they think copy of a backup. In Veeam terminology, replication means true DR business continuity. We have a copy of your VMDKs or VHDXs, right, your VM files, and they're sitting on a production data store at the NewCloud side. So in the next little animation here, we'll see the VMs from production, and those are going to go across that Cloud Connect tunnel, and they're going to be replicated to the Veeam cloud service provider side on the right. Okay. Yep. And if you had some, whether it's a partial site or full site failover, we're able to log into a web console, click a button, literally, and have all of your machines power on automatically. The beauty of replication is that these are not compressed and deduped backup files that we have to rehydrate and unzip and rebuild. So when you have really critical recovery time objectives, sometimes referred to as RTOs, maybe your tier 1 applications, that's a great use case for Cloud Connect replication when you can't afford to be down for longer than 60 seconds. Okay. So how about some more data protection tips? Let's flip on to the next slide, and we'll give you some additional insight here. So rotating drives is a great one, right? When you don't have that offline, maybe tape, a lot of people are getting away from tape. You can always use rotated drives. It can be a little cumbersome to, either remove drives or, take them offline. There's always, PowerShell scripts you could do to detach or dismount the drives when they're not in use. But again, can be a little cumbersome, but it's a great way. I mean, if the disks are not online, there's no way, at least that I know of, unless it's magic, that a hacker could hit that with the ransomware. A physical server, Linux or Windows, different authentications, no domain memberships, and that's also real important for the Veeam server as well. Don't put your Veeam server on your production domain. Give it a local service account. Don't make it a domain admin. Kind of let it just be, isolated. So strong usernames, strong user passwords, and this may seem like common sense, but you'd be surprised. I actually am guilty of using some basic passwords that are just easy for me to remember on a lot of my accounts, which I know I shouldn't do. But having lots of different passwords, real strong passwords, Windows credentials, Cloud Connect credentials, these are going to be the tenant credentials that NewCloud gives you in order to send your backups to that repository. And any other kind of integrations, any other services, repositories, proxies, all of these services that are moving data, storing data, executing services need to have different credentials and strong credentials. Having mixed repositories is great. I always like to say that I've never seen a bilingual ransomware strain before. So having a Windows repository as well as a Linux repository, great way to ensure that you're not going to get hit, right? Now, we mentioned earlier that most ransomwares are from Windows, but some also can target Linux. And, so if you were to have both, again, almost, I won't say 100%, but I'd say 97% sure that ransomware is not going to be able to hit both of those repositories. VLAN segmentation. So, you can definitely have different VLANs that are completely separated from each other, right, through some sort of switching. There's a lot of things called crypto worms that start from Active Directory and just begin to spread through the network. And once they're in that network and they're coming in through AD, it's going to be really hard to stop that. But if you have different VLANs, you might be able to, cut the head off and kind of quarantine where that virus is and maybe save a lot of the infected or the non-infected data that you still have. We see a lot of ransomwares that happen from someone's workstation, right? Somebody opens an email and they're on the same domain as, they're at their company. And so from there, everything just begins to spread. So being able to segment that is really good. Okay, so we talked proactive, but, this is a cat and mouse game. There's always the chance that something's going to happen in the real world. So when it does, what can you do, right? We want to be reactive here now. And so really you have 3 options for ransomware remediation. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. These 3 options aren't the best. The first is Bitcoin. Pay the ransom, right? Now, there's no guarantee that the data is going to be decrypted, right? I mentioned earlier ransomware as a service, right? And that's important because back when ransomware first started, and even when it became a money-making opportunity, these ransomware strains were known by specific names, right? I don't know the names of these ransomwares. I'm sure they were very clever, but those ransomware strains were known, and if you were to pay the ransom, and then word would get around that, hey, if you pay, this one ransomware virus code, they're known for giving you your data back. Well, today with the ransomware as a service, we see these people setting up shops all across the world. They're not even in the same country. And by the time they've gotten their Bitcoin, they're gone. They've already closed down shop and moved on to the next software, the next ransomware. So there's no guarantee that they're going to pay you back. They don't even really have a reason to, because there's just so many. Now, the second option here, restore compromised data from backups. And so what that means is you go into your repository, you do a restore, you find out, oh man, that backup, that had some infected files in it too. Maybe it's a 0-day virus. Maybe you restore it and you think everything's good. A couple weeks later, that ransomware strain releases and you're back to where you started. And the third option here, contact your local crime prevention fraud field office. You get involved with the FBI. This really is just more for catching the criminals, right? Trying to find out and stop this from happening in the future. But if you're relying on the government there to get you your data back, you're probably going to be disappointed. So. Now, when we talk about that second option, restoring compromised data, before you go into all of that, there's some things you can do. Before you go into a restore, and we'll just walk through these animations. Yeah, so if the production environment gets locked up and they ask for Bitcoin, right, your backup repository could be locked as well, right? Or it may have some infection in there as well. There's something called Youre Backup, and we can leverage Youre Backup with storage snapshots. So if you have a production SAN and you're taking storage snapshots and it has some Veeam integration, we're able to take your backup file and spin it up in an isolated environment, run it for a while, test it, do some forensics on it, right? Make sure that backup is safe and uninfected. As a matter of fact, another feature came out after this slide was created, but we now have the ability to do an antivirus scan on your backup file before you restore it. If you do find that it's infected, you're able to quarantine that, abort the operation. So we have quite a few different ways to test that data before you restore it, and it's all non-disruptive. Okay. All right. So most of what we've talked about is VMware, Hyper-V. These are the traditional kind of data centers we see. But we know there's still a lot of physical machines, endpoints, devices, maybe laptops even, that we need to protect. So let's take a look first at the Veeam agent for Linux. The Veeam agent for Linux is for your Linux boxes, obviously. The agent is installed on the Linux machine itself, and you're able to back up, all the data. You're able to do bare metal restores. You're able to do file level recovery, volume level recovery. So pretty much the same protection you would get with virtual. And then we also have the Veeam agent for Windows. Same thing, different GUI, different operating system, obviously, but it's the same underlying product. We're able to do the bare metal restores. We're even able to do restores into the public cloud if you had to. The great thing about working with new cloud, however, is that you wouldn't have to deal with any of that. Some people find the public cloud enticing, but when you actually have to start using it, especially in a situation where your production environment is down, it would be much better to have new cloud networks who are Veeam experts, excellent managed service providers, being able to restore these backups for you in their data centers. And with that, I think I'll pass it back over to Sydney. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate it. So the key takeaway here is that New Cloud works really closely with Veeam to offer you total ransomware protection. And we do this by combining Veeam software with our ultra-low latency network of cloud hubs, which allows you to create secure, encrypted, and automated backups of your data while getting them off-site quickly. and also pulling them back when you need them. And with replication, you can get really granular with your restore, isolate compromised files, and recover the rest of your data, similar to the way that Brandon went through in this webinar. But really quickly, I do want to take a step back and give you some context as to who NewCloud is for those of you who may not be familiar with us. So NewCloud Networks is a cloud service provider, and we've been in business since 1988. And obviously, we weren't in the cloud back then, or called NewCloud. That would have been some great foresight on our part. But our background is in networking, and we've evolved several times over the years to adjust our offerings according to the changes in technology. And as such, we've amassed over 1,000 customers in the United States and in Europe. We're a platinum level Veeam partner, and we're one of the first partners actually to launch Cloud Connect with Veeam. And we've built a reputation for quality within our industry. And our SLA and customer satisfaction rating do a good job of exemplifying that. And now, this map is a breakdown of our nationwide ultra-low latency cloud network. Our network is designed and built for backup and disaster recovery. And when we talk about backup and disaster recovery, it's important to have your data far enough away from your main site so that it won't be affected by the same natural disaster, but also close enough so that it's usable when you actually need to stand up VMs. And we control the bandwidth and the latency between all of these locations so we can ensure that the customer's data is always usable. And if your company is hit by ransomware, this means that we can get your data backups and replicas back to you quickly, which limits or eliminates downtime. Now, we work hand in glove with Veeam to bring our customers best-in-breed solutions. We have a variety of Veeam offerings that we support. Our engineers are Veeam certified, and we work really hard to implement technology quickly. We offer the full suite of Veeam backup and disaster recovery services, as you can see here on your screen. So what makes us great? At NewCloud Networks, we believe that great technology is powered by great people. And we're always being asked what sets us apart from the likes of Amazon or Microsoft, and our answer is always the same. We believe in personalized service, not a 1-800 number. Our customers can rest assured that we have top engineers available to them 24/7 by 365 to help with any issues that may arise. We know that no two companies are the same, so we don't believe in cookie-cutter cloud solutions. We work closely with our customers to ensure that we develop solutions that address their core business needs. And we implement these solutions using best-in-breed technology. And we're able to provide our solutions at an affordable price. So the bottom line is that we believe in taking care of our customers. And as part of taking care of our customers, we mentioned earlier that we want to ensure that your businesses are protected from ransomware attacks and any other malicious attacks that might affect your business. So backup and disaster recovery are really only just one piece of that puzzle. And as mentioned previously, hackers are constantly poking holes in our defenses. So implementing firewalls, antivirus, intrusion prevention and detection, and email security, just to name a few, can significantly reduce the risk. And these solutions can help prevent network intrusions. And if a hacker does get in, they can alert you to intruders immediately. So this is important to note that a majority of ransomware attacks and viruses are triggered by human error. And they're mainly triggered by humans hitting a corrupted link in an email. And so that's where email security can make a huge difference. And for emails that might still get through, security awareness training, as Brandon had mentioned previously in the webinar, really does help employees in reducing the likelihood of human error. And Brandon mentioned that Veeam and NewCloud are active proponents of security awareness training, and we're taught to recognize and handle suspicious emails. I've actually personally received a few suspicious emails that at first look, they look like they're coming from our president. But in reality, I'll click into it and the domain is not from NewCloud Networks. They've modified the name to say Sam Kumar, and they've used a different domain. But given my training, I was able to recognize and report it to our IT department to ensure that they block those domains from getting through in the future. So now for some exciting news. As a thank you for attending the webinar today and in partnership with Veeam, New Cloud Networks is offering all eligible Veeam users a 1 terabyte free of Cloud Connect backup for 1 year. So this is a really great opportunity for you guys to kick the tires and learn about how easy it is to start backing up your data offsite. So after this webinar, you will receive an email from New Cloud Networks inviting you to claim this offer. I know we've talked a lot about not clicking on suspicious email links, but this actually is a legitimate offer. You're being warned now that we're going to be sending you a link where you can click and activate your 1 terabyte. And then once you activate it, following that, you'll receive an email with your username and password and instructions on how you can log into the system and access your 1 terabyte free. So if there's any questions on that, please feel free to reach out in the question chat or email me directly. My information will be up here on the next slide. And with that, I would like to invite you to use that question feature and submit any questions you have. We'll do our best to answer as many as possible here. There are a lot of you on this webinar, so if we don't get to you, we will follow up with you afterwards. Without further ado, I will go ahead and just take a look at the screen. The first question that's coming through here: how do you prevent ransomware from getting into your backups if they're using Veeam offsite? And I'll throw that over to Brandon.
Yep, that is a great question. So we have a feature inside of the Veeam console, and New Cloud Networks is one of the few service providers that use that feature, and it's called Insider Protection. So, first of all, your backups are on another network. So if your local backups were to get hit via the Windows, administration password or Active Directory, that wouldn't translate over to New Cloud because they're on a completely different domain network. But if somehow they were able to hop across the internet and delete your backups off-site, if you have Insider Protection turned on, which is just something they a checkbox, it's super simple. Those backups, as soon as they're deleted and they're not part of it's not based on their retention, those backups get moved to a recycling bin that only the service provider can see. So that's how we do that.
Great. And next question: what's the best strategy against ransomware? Is it forward incremental or reverse? Is it best to do synthetic full backups once in a while, or does it matter?
Great question. So I would say that reverse, forward, synthetic don't matter in terms of the chain, because if the chain gets infected, it's gone, right? Very rarely are you going to see, I guess in reverse incremental, you have the full backup as your most recent restore point, so that would be the only point you need. But also keep in mind that full restore is the delta changes between the last block. So pretty sure that if any of that chain is infected, all of it's infected. Now, we do have, like I said, that sure backup feature, and that sure backup is what allows you to make sure that your backups can be turned on, spun up, that the application inside is working. So that should give you a peace of mind. If it doesn't, you can always do an active full. So an active full would be, I guess, a little bit extra protection because that's a brand new full from production. Now, of course, that's assuming that your production box isn't infected as well.
Great. Next question: if we have in-house Veeam licenses, would you work with that? The answer is yes. So New Cloud Networks, as part of your license that you have for your on-premise solution, Cloud Connect is there. All you need to do is log into your console and enable Cloud Connect and then point it over at New Cloud Networks. It's a separate cost associated with that because it's a separate repository, but it will work with your existing Veeam license. And then Brandon, I have a question here that says, wondering about ransomware for S3 compatible storage.
Yeah, so great question. So the object storage, okay, if your backups were deleted from a disk, then you would be okay because that wouldn't hit the backups that are in object storage. They're its own chain. And if you have older chains in object storage, those would be okay. But keep in mind that if a ransomware encrypts a backup on a disk and then moves it to object storage, well, you just brought that in, kind of like the Trojan horse we talked about earlier. a little sneak peek. So in Veeam version 10, we are going to be releasing immutable backups. And so immutable backups are going to be a provisioning thing that we can do in object storage where you can lock down the bucket. And so backups, once the backup is moved to the object storage, you're not allowed to revision or make any changes to that object storage. So that will definitely help. But by all means, in terms of deletion and things like that, yes, object storage is kind of its own separate thing as well.
Great. And then do you recommend taking the local Veeam backup server off the domain and encrypting all backups?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Do you recommend taking the local Veeam backup server off the domain and encrypting all backups?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was I don't know why I got confused by that question. Yes, the local Veeam server, the Veeam server should have a local service account, not tied to the domain, or at least have the least amount of privileges. Definitely don't make it the Veeam admin, and always encrypt your backups. AES 256 encryption is what we use. We do encryption at rest, encryption across the internet when we're doing the backups to Cloud Connect, and they can have your backups encrypted there as well.
Next question that came through. I do have Brandon's email address incorrect here on this slide. I'm sorry. We had a different engineer help us at one point. I forgot to change it. But it is his first name dot last name at veeam.com. So just brandon.mccoy@veeam.com. And I will send out his email as well as mine in a follow-up when we submit the offer to all of you as well, so you have that. And then next question, would it be possible for Veeam to have a feature that locks repositories to read-only? There's more to this question. I just scrolled and lost it. To read-only, like how worm drives work until a backup runs again.
Yes. So there are, and if you guys are not in the Veeam forums, if you're Veeam customers already and you're not part of our weekly digest, definitely in the Pro Partner portal, sign up for that. We do have a blog post, and it talks about PowerShell scripting. So yeah, you could always do a PowerShell that runs, to turn the repository off, take it offline, dismount the drives. During certain hours. You would just need to kind of time that right, make sure that, obviously it doesn't get turned off while it's being written to. If you, whoever asked that question, if you want to give me your email, I can actually send you the blog post, and it really spells out how to do it. I'm not very familiar with PowerShell.
I can provide that to you after the webinar.
Perfect.
So what are some essential ways to prevent a local Veeam repository from getting impacted by ransomware on the network?
Most of the things that we already talked about, right? VLAN segmentation, strong username passwords. You can also do some security hardening. If you Google Veeam best practices, there's a whole section, or actually just Google Veeam hardening, and it'll take you right to that section of that document. And it talks about removing unnecessary components. So if you've downloaded backup and replication and Veeam1 and the enterprise manager, all the different little applications that are in this one download, if you're not using those particular applications, you can power those off. You can remove those from the console, keeping everything up to date, keeping things separate. A lot of it's around hardening your environment, right? Giving Veeam the least amount of privileges it needs to do its job, keeping it off the domain, or at least, like I said, minimal privileges, and just keeping everything separate with strong username passwords.
Great. And just a comment from one of our viewers here. If we didn't mention, I do apologize, but your backups should always be encrypted. At NewCloud, we do encrypt them in transit and at rest when you're doing cloud backups. But if you're doing anything tape or disk, those should always be encrypted with a key that's unique to your company or even whoever is doing that backup, and stored in a separate location, just for security standards, as well as ensuring if you do cloud backups that you have that security, that added level security as well. And with that, I do see a few more questions popping in here, but I would like to give you guys a few more minutes back in your day. And I do appreciate you taking the time to join the webinar with us. And as I mentioned previously, the follow-up will definitely be the 1 terabyte offer coming your way within the next 24 hours. So please feel free to reach out to myself or brandon.mccoy@veeam.com with any additional questions. And again, thank you so much for your time today and for joining the webinar. And hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.